Hello. Uh, I still haven't gotten rid of that delay at the beginning there, so I didn't want people to think their computers are broken or Wi-Fi is out. I'm Alan Wheeler, and this channel, at least for a season, will focus on the topic of tarot and spirituality. And the title will be something like The Tarot Compares Mainstream, New Age, and Pagan Paths. Because that's something I was reflecting on this morning. And I'll actually be asking a few specific questions and doing a couple tarot readings about this after I give the background. So uh, before I get into the issue at hand, um, I'd like to introduce items from my altar until I run out of things to talk about here. And today I'll introduce you to my incense burner. And on this, I'm going to empty these ashes here. And on this incense burner, I noticed for the first time since I bought it, uh, there's a star, a five-pointed star here at the end of it. And it was a pleasant, happy synchronicity for me because recently I've seen stars in several places that have led me to research and look into the call of the Morrigan. And I saw a star on a truck driving home, and then remembered one hanging on chimes in our carport left by our landlord, and found another that I had forgotten about that was left on my desk by the previous occupant. And so among other things that I talked about in another video and probably need to let rest as I'm still seeking what these things could mean. But serendipitously, that's here on my altar, just in case that is indeed a deity I'll be connecting with. It does relate a bit to the question at hand, because I do want to ask Odin um, about my role in these issues, as well as ask Hecate about any personal gnosis or gnosis or feelings that I can be having about these issues. But let me give the background. I hear things from time to time that tell me that there are not only personal differences, but sometimes strong disagreements among people who walk alternative spiritual paths. And I suppose that shouldn't be surprising. Um, but I've heard these comments, even though most agree. I hear agree we should follow our own hearts, follow our own paths. But then I hear stories that for a time there was sharp disagreement about whether one could be a solitary witch or needed to belong to a coven. Um, I've heard people say, I'm a pagan witch, not a New Age witch. And of course, it's pretty common to hear the strained relationship between pagan and mainstream religions, particularly Christianity. So I came with this on my heart, and I made a little chart. Um, this wasn't deep research. I just looked on Wikipedia because I more want a sense. I'm not going to take any of this as gospel or even fact. Um, but I wanted to get an idea of the issues at play and kind of the landscape that I might be looking at. So um, I have New Age on one side of the chart and Wicca and Pagan on the other side, because I think I've come across some things that um, uh, sometimes Wicca is associated with Pagan, and sometimes groups consider them very separate. So I just listed them on the right side of the page at the top. So adding further confusion to the issue, Wikipedia said that most um, people who belong to the New Age do not call themselves by that name. So uh, I think that is problematic. But just for the conversation, just to get the ball rolling, in my mind, and I'm sure I will think about this for a long time. On the left side, uh, Wikipedia described the New Age groups and people as looking toward human ascension or a future evolution of people and beliefs. Let me pause the video here just for a minute. I forgot my card. Oh well. Now, did I mention the age of Aquarius for the on the New Age side of the chart? I think so. And then the again, this is all according to Wikipedia. So whatever is wrong, and I've seen some of these that some groups would disagree with. Please leave a comment. I'm very interested in that. Uh, but again, according to Wikipedia, the pagan groups are more interested in the pre-Christian past and getting back to an older tradition. On the New Age side, there's sometimes angels and some Christian parallels. Um, there tends to be a belief that religions are fundamentally the same. Uh, so there's perhaps more overlap with Christian beliefs, and certainly in just from my own experience attending Reiki sessions at a Unity church in town, there's very Christian friendly interplay and overlap between some of the other alternate spirituality there. On the pagan side of the chart, there's a strained relationship to Christianity, which is seen as very different, the monotheism as being very, very different from the pagan paths, and often the Christianity is denounced as anti-natural, repressive, anti-female, authoritarian, intolerant, and I didn't have room for all the negative terms listed there. So this is a bit of a difference there. Again, on the New Age side, there's an emphasis on spiritual life and other realms, I think. Whereas on the pagan side, there's an emphasis on nature and the physical world. And at the core, although maybe some of these practices overlap, but at the core, there's a great concern with magic, ritual, uh, witchcraft, which is practice, practical application there. So these are some of the differences, and there's other things that we could get into. For example, I think uh, uh, many of the people that are grouped here as New Age would look to the higher self rather than literal deities. I could be wrong there. But in the many of the pagan paths, um, the attempt to reconstruct the ethnic and pagan past, uh, the deities are um, often uh, more literal, I think. The spectrum, I read elsewhere that there's a spectrum of belief, though, within these alternate paths, especially pagan paths. And on one side, you have the focus on reinventing or reconstructing this ethnic and past religion. So it will be strongly based in a culture or location. And then on the far other side of the spectrum, we would have very eclectic uh, groups and people who feel much freedom to piece together gods from different pantheons. And so it gets to be a bit of a stew in one sense, from which individuals pick and groups pick and choose. So one scholar notes, as far as New Age and pagan beliefs and practices, there are things that are parallel. There are places that overlap, and there are also sharp differences between them. So, looking more closely at the specific people and groups would bring more light. Now, where this comes to bear on me is I'm conflicted, not just because I walk a blended path and have cognitive dissonance at times, but because I would like, on the one hand, to see acceptance and understanding um, between all groups. The polarization, especially in politics in America today, just grieves me. Um, but I'm not so interested in politics. But in religion, spirituality, I'm very interested, and it grieves me to see the combativeness, I think, and the alienation or creating of outcasts from groups. So, on the one hand, I would love to see openness and acceptance. On the other hand, I do understand that identity is very important to groups, and that a community is often defined by its borders. And so, having that diversity, having the right to um, be and to express one's individuality or one's culture is very important. So, um, and then it goes a step further when I bring in my own mainstream religion into the mix. And I've had a few kerfluffles or skirmishes with more conservative Christian friends on Facebook when I've posted um, certain topics. And so it's a real issue in mind and in life for me. And so I turn, to help me think through this, I turn to the cards. And the first question, and I already, just a few minutes ago, I pulled the card, I shuffled the decks and pulled the runes and cards in advance, just in case I needed to sit with them a little longer. I didn't want to get caught in the same situation I did a day ago when uh, I just collapsed and uh, didn't read into the card quickly enough a good answer to the question. So I went ahead just to make sure I didn't get caught out and pulled the cards and sat with them just a few minutes here already. But the first question, I in a way turned to Odin because I've had some experiences with him um, downloading wisdom or opening my mind to certain things in the past. So in the um, with this in mind, I asked the cards how I should believe for my own service and purpose about these different approaches and practices. Because I feel if my relationship, my connections with Odin um, remain and grow, there's a call to service of a kind there somehow. Um, and from what I read as I investigate, very similar with the Morrigan. So my question is, how does this, which is the burning issue, perhaps, in my spiritual life, um, what should I believe or think about these different approaches and practices as regard what I should do, how I can serve, how I can help in some way? And then I'll turn to the Crystal Visions Tarot, and I will consult them with Hecate in mind and ask how I should feel about the situation, about this tension, about the conflict, and is there any UPG or unverified personal gnosis available that I can have about these different paths? So let's begin with the first question. How should I believe for my own sake, um, for my own service, um, and as far as living, things I do, how I can serve or help? And the first rune I drew was Pertho. And Pertho, let me make sure this is recording. Okay, I didn't see the timestamp and I panicked there for a minute. Okay, so Pertho, um, I read this as mystery, and that maybe there's ambiguity in what helps and how to serve, and that um, perhaps living authentically, um, going about my own business, doing my own thing, um, in walking the path of my life and following my heart. Sometimes I won't even know when I may be helping this situation. Anyway, mystery, there's some mystery there, and perhaps meant to be there. Um, Further consulting the cards, this is the alchemical tarot version of the Four of Cups. It's the Four of Vessels, and this slow moving large elephant is kind of stuck here on the top of these vessels. And so, um, again, thinking of the traditional meanings of the Four of Cups as well, perhaps this card is saying that there is a balance to be maintained, and uh, maybe some things that need to be done, there is a reluctance there, um, not wanting to drink that cup, so to speak. So I could certainly identify that with, for example, when I posted Odin symbol on Facebook and gave some Christian comparisons, I got a little pushback, even my own sister, um, from my own family there. The next card is strength. And so there's the lion and that archetypal meaning of finding inner strength. And finally, the Ten of Swords, the end of a cycle in the realm of air, communication or thinking. And this book, laying out here, um, emphasizes that it involves thinking or knowledge and communication. And this card tells me that probably um, this service, being involved in this issue, involves just dying to my own thoughts and having to say what I think, um, even if it feels like I'm laying stabbed 10 times in the chest. In this case, he's laying face up, unlike some of the other cards. I think that speaks very well of how to be involved in this issue. If communicating with these different groups, uh, I shouldn't be spouting off. Probably will be dying to some of my own ideas and need to speak. Although I hope I don't mansplain all the time, and certainly to maintain that balance. And it's going to be a mystery um, walking through this. Now, the turning to Hecate and the Crystal Visions Tarot, I pulled a jade rune instead of the obsidian from the obsidian set, and I pulled this jade rune, Isis, and it's possible the meaning reflects that Four of Cups energy. Isaz means ice. It can speak of stability, stasis, sometimes being stuck as well. And so it could mean coming from a place of balance, or it could mean feeling stuck about this issue. So I will have to sit with that a bit. The first card I drew from Crystal Visions Tarot was the Eight of Wands, and look at these unicorns bursting down the hill, just galloping with this breakthrough of energy, this fantastical, imaginative energy. Motivation, will, force, work. Let's look at the next card because I think these connect. The Eight of Cups. So we have two eights here. And here we see a figure setting off, perhaps leaving these waters behind and walking into the moonshine here. And so a breakthrough of energy, leaving on an emotional journey, perhaps leaving where things have felt stuck or stagnant. So I think the 8, which sometimes speaks of work, but often a new beginning and journey, especially in the case of the 8 of Cups. And then the final card from Crystal Visions is the Tower. And that's a serious major arcana card. And so I will need to sit with this, of course. But probably, if it ties it all in with the 10 of the Swords, it means letting those old structures break away and letting those, whether it be pride or just rote practice, letting some of those things crumble and fall here. They're falling into the sea with the birds flying all around. And of course, that sets the stage for a new beginning there as well. So those are some thoughts for me as I consider dealing personally with this struggle. And so I think I'll stop here. It's almost 30 minutes, and I need to reflect on those cards a little more. But this is my way of dealing with the differing paths, the alternative paths, and the sometimes the sharp differences, sometimes the conflict between them. So, as always, I hope you feel connection with real life friendships, with online community, and especially on your spiritual path, whatever that may be. Take care. Thanks so much for watching today.